Ellie, if you can't keep it together, maybe you shouldn't come home at all. The words echoed in my mind as I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen. The phone call from Officer Daniels still reverberated through my head, dulling my senses. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Parker, but there's been an accident. Your parents, they didn't survive. I hung up, choking on my tears. My parents, on their way to the Grand Canyon for their annual road trip, gone in an instant. I fumbled for my phone, dialing my husband, Mike. Mike, I need you. My parents. My voice cracked. Ellie, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can't this wait? Mike's irritation pierced through the line. They're dead, Mike. My parents are dead, I sobbed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Silence. Then, with a sigh, Ellie, if you can't keep it together, maybe you shouldn't come home at all. He hung up. Stunned, I dropped the phone. The hum of the office felt distant as I rushed out, barely noticing my colleagues' concerned glances. The drive home was a blur. When I arrived, Mike was already there, standing in the kitchen. Ellie, you're blowing this out of proportion, he said, barely looking up. My parents just died, I shouted. How can you be so cold? Look, it's not my fault. You need to handle this better. He snapped back, turning away to avoid my gaze. I retreated to our bedroom, tears streaming down my face. Memories of my parents flooded in. Thanksgivings, road trips, their laughter. Everything was shattered. I felt alone, misunderstood, even in my own home. Later that night, after putting our daughter Lizzie to bed, I approached Mike again. We need to talk about the funeral. I have a big project due. I might not make it, he said flatly, tapping on his laptop. Can't you see what I'm going through? My voice trembled, anger mixing with grief. Ellie, I'm tired. We'll talk tomorrow. And with that, he walked out, leaving me alone with my pain. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, heard their voices. By morning, I was numb. I typed out the obituary, made funeral arrangements, all while Lizzie asked why Grandma and Grandpa weren't coming back. I couldn't find the words to explain. Days passed, blending into a haze. The neighborhood sympathy offered little comfort. Everyone's questions, their pitying looks, made it worse, and Mike's indifference was a knife twisting deeper into my heart. The day of the funeral, I dressed Lizzie in her best dress. Why isn't Daddy coming? She asked quietly. He has work, sweetheart, I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady for her sake. At the funeral, standing beside the caskets, I felt utterly hollow. Friends and family offered condolences, but I barely registered their presence. Cheryl, Mike's mother, approached me with a look of forced sympathy. Such a tragedy, she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Have you thought about the inheritance? It might help with expenses. I stared at her, disbelief blending with fury. My parents just died. How can you talk about money? I'm just being practical, dear. Someone has to be, she replied, patting my shoulder in a mock display of comfort. Her words left me even more broken. Cheryl never cared about anyone but herself and her son. That night, I sat in the dark, my resolve hardening. My parents deserved justice, and I wouldn't let Mike's apathy or his mother's greed tarnish their memory. It was time to face the harsh reality of my life and take control. As the moonlight filtered through the window, I made a silent vow. Things would change. I would not let their deaths be in vain, and I would not remain trapped in this loveless, uncaring marriage any longer. The days leading up to the funeral were a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I spent every moment arranging services, choosing flowers, coordinating with the funeral home. Mike remained distant, claiming work obligations kept him busy. The weight of his indifference crushed me. One evening, I caught him slinking into the house late. Where were you? I demanded. Work. Had to stay late, he replied, avoiding eye contact. Late again? Every night this week, Mike? My voice cracked with frustration. Ellie, I told you, it's a big project, he snapped. He brushed past me and headed to our bedroom, closing the door behind him. I stood there, feeling more alone than ever. The night before the funeral, Cheryl showed up unannounced. She breezed into the living room, her perfume overwhelming. Ellie, how are you holding up? She asked, her tone insincere. Doing what I can, I replied, keeping my eyes on the carpet. Cheryl's gaze shifted to the closed bedroom door. Where's Mike? Still working, I said through gritted teeth. That man works too much, she tutted, then turned her attention back to me. So have you decided what's happening with their estate? I clenched my fists. Cheryl, it's not the time. Don't be so emotional, Ellie. This is about practicality, she said, her voice cool. My parents are gone, Cheryl. I can't think about money right now, I replied, barely holding back tears. Well, you need to. Mike and Lizzie need security, she continued, as if she wasn't intruding on my grief. Mike and Lizzie are not my immediate concern, I snapped, standing my ground. She huffed, clearly displeased. Fine, Ellie, but don't take too long. This is important for the family. As soon as she left, I collapsed onto the couch, the weight of everything suffocating me. Mike's absence, Cheryl's greed, the loss of my parents. It was too much. I needed to stay strong for Lizzie, but my resolve was slipping. The funeral day arrived, gray and somber. I dressed in black, every motion robotic. Lizzie clung to my side, sensing the gravity of the day even if she didn't fully understand. As we approached the church, Mike's car was nowhere to be seen. He had promised to meet us there, but the empty space felt like a slap. Inside, the service began. The minister spoke kind words about my parents, but all I could think about was Mike's empty seat. When it was my turn to speak, I choked back tears just looking at the sea of sympathetic faces. Afterward, at the reception, Cheryl approached again. You need to think about Lizzie's future, she said, cornering me by the refreshment table. I'm trying to get through today, I said, my voice breaking. Ellie, you're the mother now. You have responsibilities, she lectured, her eyes hard. I'm well aware of my responsibilities, Cheryl, I replied sharply, barely containing my anger. Her face twisted in disapproval. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she muttered before walking away. Standing there, surrounded by people, yet utterly alone, something inside me hardened. Mike's coldness, Cheryl's incessant greed, these weren't just inconveniences. They were part of a larger problem, a toxic burden I didn't need to carry. I looked down at Lizzie, her innocent face looking up at me. For her sake, I knew I had to act. I couldn't rely on Mike or endure Cheryl's manipulation any longer. My parents' death had shattered my world. Now I had to rebuild it, stronger for both of us. It was time to make some changes, and I knew exactly where to start. As days turned into weeks after the funeral, I noticed Mike's absences becoming more frequent and his excuses thinner. Each late-night return chipped away at the fragile remnants of our marriage. One evening, while Lizzie was engrossed in her homework, I cornered him in the kitchen. Where have you been, Mike? I asked, my voice steady. Work, Ellie. I told you, he replied, avoiding eye contact as he rummaged through the fridge. Work? Really? I crossed my arms. You smell like cheap perfume. He froze, then turned to face me, his expression hardening. You're imagining things. Maybe you should get help. I scoffed, fury boiling up. Don't turn this on me. I know something's going on. You're paranoid, he snapped, grabbing a soda and slamming the fridge door shut. I watched him walk away, a decision forming in my mind. If he wouldn't come clean, I'd find out myself. I had to know the truth for my and Lizzie's sake. The next day I made a call to a private investigator. Hello, Mr. Harris. I need to find out what my husband's up to, I explained, feeling a mix of desperation and resolve. Mr. Harris was efficient. Within a week he had gathered enough evidence to fill a small folder. We met in a nondescript cafe, him sliding the folder across the table. You were right to suspect, Mrs. Parker. He's been seeing a woman named Kim Blackwood. She works at a local bar. My heart pounded as I flipped through the photographs. Mike with Kim, laughing, holding hands, even kissing in public. Betrayal stabbed at me, but I forced myself to remain calm. Thank you, Mr. Harris, I said, my voice steady. I'll take it from here. That night, I confronted Mike when he finally showed up. Care to explain these? I tossed the folder onto the couch. His eyes widened as he saw the contents. Ellie, I can explain, he stammered. Explain what? That you've been lying to me? Cheating on me? My voice rose with each word. It's not what it looks like, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Because it looks like you've been with her for months, I shot back, my anger giving me strength. Work's been stressful, Ellie. You've been so distant. Don't you dare blame this on me. I interrupted, my body shaking with rage. You betrayed our family. You betrayed Lizzie. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. I want a divorce, Mike, and you're going to pay for what you've done. His face turned from guilt to anger. You think you can just take Lizzie away from me? I'll fight you on this. I have more than enough evidence. Any court would side with me, I said, standing tall. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about our daughter, and she deserves better. Mike stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, breathing heavily, the house silent except for the ticking of the clock. Lizzie was asleep upstairs, unaware of the storm that had just erupted. The next morning, I began gathering more evidence, financial records, text messages, anything that would secure my case. Each piece of proof was another step toward freeing myself and protecting Lizzie. I contacted a lawyer, determined to proceed strategically. "We have a strong case," the lawyer assured me. "With the evidence you've provided, we can ensure full custody and a hefty alimony. Your husband won't stand a chance." Hearing those words bolstered my resolve. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming my life and safeguarding Lizzie's future. I was ready to fight, and I wouldn't back down until justice was served. I sat in the lawyer's office, the divorce papers in front of me. My hands felt steady as I signed each page. My attorney, Mrs. Grant, gave a nod of approval. "We've got a strong case, Ellie. Present these to Mike and he'll realize he can't win." Leaving the office, I felt a strange mix of determination and dread. I drove straight home, needing to confront Mike immediately, armed with the legal documents and unshakable resolve. He was sitting on the couch, watching TV, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing. "Mike, we need to talk," I said, standing in front of him, blocking the screen. He looked up, irritated. "What now, Ellie?" I tossed the papers onto his lap. "These. Sign them." He glanced at them, his face slowly turning red as he realized what they were. "Divorce papers? You've got to be kidding me." He stood up, towering over me. "I'm done, Mike. I want out, and I'm taking Lizzie with me," I replied, not backing down. His face twisted in anger. "You think you can just walk away and take my daughter? I'll fight this. I'll ruin you, Ellie. You'll never get custody." "I've got plenty of evidence to prove you're unfit," I shot back. "Your affair, your neglect, I'll make sure the court sees it all." He laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You really think you can beat me? I'll drag you through the mud. I'll make sure everyone knows you're the unstable one. You won't have a leg to stand on." "Do what you want, Mike. I'm not backing down. Lizzie deserves better than this toxic environment." "You think you're some kind of hero?" "You're nothing without me, Ellie," he sneered. I felt a surge of anger. "I'm stronger than you think, and I'll prove it. Sign the papers, Mike, or I'll see you in court." For a moment we stood there, glaring at each other. Finally, he snatched the papers and threw them to the ground. "This isn't over, Ellie. Not by a long shot." I picked up the papers, my resolve strengthened by his threats. "We'll see about that." Over the next week, Mike's threats became more intense. He called me at all hours, leaving angry voicemails. He showed up at my job, trying to cause scenes, but my coworkers helped keep him at bay. It was exhausting, but I refused to let him see me falter. One evening, I heard him on the phone with his mother. "She's trying to ruin me, Mom. I need to find a way to take Lizzie away from her." Cheryl's voice came through, sharp and manipulative. "We'll fight this together, Mike. She won't stand a chance against us." I knew they'd stop at nothing to hurt me, to take Lizzie from me. But I wouldn't let them. I had the support of my lawyer, my friends, and my undeniable evidence. I had to be strong for Lizzie. I called Mrs. Grant. "We need to proceed. His threats are escalating." "We'll move quickly," she assured me. "Stay strong, Ellie. We've got this." The next morning, Mike received an official notice to appear in court. His fury was evident as he stormed into the house, waving the papers. "You think you can win this?" "Yes," I replied simply, "because it's the truth." "This is war, Ellie," he spat, throwing the papers at my feet. "So be it," I said, standing firm. For Lizzie, for my parents' memory, and for myself, I would not back down. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. I sat at a small table in the corner of the cafe, my heart beating fast. I clutched the divorce papers in my hand, waiting for Mike to arrive. The sounds of steaming milk and clinking cups filled the air, but I was focused on the door. When Mike finally walked in, his eyes locked onto me with a look of sheer contempt. He sat down roughly, not bothering with pleasantries. "What do you want, Ellie?" "I want this over with." "You need to sign these," I said, pushing the papers towards him. He glanced at them, his jaw tightening. "I told you, I'm not signing anything. You think you can just waltz in here and dictate everything?" "You had your chance, Mike. Now it's about protecting Lizzie and moving on." He sneered. You're delusional if you think you're getting any money from me. And Lizzie? Over my dead body. As he spoke, his boss Derek entered the cafe. Derek was heading to the counter when he recognized Mike and turned towards us, encouraged by visible intrigue. Mike, what's going on here? Derek asked, eyes shifting between us. Mike's face turned pale. Nothing, sir. Just a family matter. Looks like more than that, Derek said, his gaze narrowing at the sight of the papers on the table. Ellie, Mike hissed, attempting to maintain his composure. This isn't the place. I seized the moment. Actually, it is. Mike, you've been lying and cheating for months. You've neglected your family and your job. Derek raised an eyebrow. Is this true? Mike stumbled over his words. It's complicated. She's blowing things out of proportion. No, Mike, I shot back. You've been spending company time with your mistress, not on work projects. Derek's expression shifted from curiosity to cold anger. Is this true, Mike? Sir, I can explain. Derek cut him off. Save it. I've had my suspicions. Consider this your last day at the office. Mike's face turned red, his anger barely contained. You can't do that. I just did, Derek replied sharply, turning and walking away. I watched Mike crumble before me, his career crashing as he realized there was no escaping this time. The cafe's ambient noise returned, but we were in a bubble of silence. You've ruined everything, Mike hissed, his voice shaking with rage. No, Mike. You did that all by yourself, I said, standing up. Mark my words, Ellie. I'm taking you down with me, he said through gritted teeth. Good luck with that, I replied, picking up the papers. As I walked out, I felt a surge of liberation. This battle was far from over, but I'd just won a significant victory. Outside the cafe, I took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. Mike's downfall had begun, and I was ready to fight for our daughter's future. Every step I took away from that confrontation was another step towards justice, for my parents, for Lizzie, and most importantly, for myself. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as I walked in, head held high. Mrs. Grant was beside me, a reassuring presence. Mike sat across the room, his face a mask of anger and defiance. His lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, whispered something into his ear. The judge called for silence. We're here today to consider custody and alimony arrangements for the Parker case, the judge announced. Mrs. Grant stood, addressing the court. Your Honor, we have clear evidence of Mr. Parker's infidelity and neglect, both as a husband and father. We request full custody for my client, Mrs. Parker, and appropriate alimony and child support. Mr. Jacobs rose, looking smug. Your Honor, Mr. Parker disputes these accusations. He has been a dedicated father and deserves joint custody at the very least. The judge nodded, flipping through the files. Mrs. Parker, please step forward. I straightened my back as I approached the stand. Can you describe your husband's involvement with your daughter, Lizzie? Mike has been absent, that both physically and emotionally, I began. He's focused on his affair and neglected his responsibilities at home. Lizzie needs stability, which I can provide. Mrs. Grant then presented the evidence. Photos, text messages, financial records, all condemning Mike. I saw his face redden as each piece of evidence was displayed. The judge looked over the documents carefully. It seems clear that Mr. Parker has been preoccupied with his affair, he said, turning to Mike. Do you have anything to say? Mike stood, his body rigid. Your Honor, this is all blown out of proportion. I've provided for my family. Ellie's just trying to ruin me. Mrs. Grant interjected. Your Honor, Lizzie's well-being is our priority. Mr. Parker's actions have shown he's incapable of being a responsible parent. At that moment, the courtroom doors creaked open and a man walked in. It was Kim's husband, Dave. He approached the judge, holding a stack of papers. Your Honor, if I may, Dave said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. I, too, have evidence against Mr. Parker and my wife, Kim. Mr. Parker's actions have not only hurt his family, but mine as well. The judge allowed him to submit the documents. Dave outlined how their affair had affected his family, detailing financial discrepancies and deceit. The courtroom listened intently, the atmosphere thick with tension. After a thorough review, the judge spoke. Mr. Parker, given the overwhelming evidence, I rule in favor of Mrs. Parker. She is granted full custody of Lizzie and significant alimony and child support. Mike's face registered defeat. This isn't fair, he muttered under his breath. The judge continued. Furthermore, these financial records suggest potential fraud. This will be investigated separately. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. As the proceedings concluded, Mike shot me a venomous look. "This isn't over, Ellie." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes, it is, Mike. Yes, it is." Outside the courtroom, Dave approached me. "I'm sorry for everything. Let's make sure they pay for what they've done." "Agreed," I said, feeling a sense of camaraderie. As I walked to my car, I called Mrs. Grant. "Thank you for everything. What's next?" "We'll finalize the paperwork, and then we'll look into those hidden accounts your investigator found," she replied. I nodded, determination burning within me. This battle was almost won, but the war wasn't over. Mike's deceit would lead to his downfall, and I was prepared for the next fight. With Lizzie by my side, there was nothing that could break me now. The knock on my door was sharp and insistent. I opened it to find a stern-faced detective holding a warrant. "Mrs. Parker, may we come in?" I stepped aside, heart pounding. "What is this about?" The detective nodded to his partner. "We're here to search for documents related to Mr. Parker's offshore accounts. We have reason to believe he's been hiding assets." My mind raced. Mike had lied and cheated, and now his financial deceit was coming to light. "Take whatever you need," I said, leading them to Mike's old office. While the detectives sifted through papers, I called Mrs. Grant. "They're searching the house for evidence of Mike's hidden accounts." "Good," she replied. "This will only strengthen our case. Stay calm and cooperate." As the detectives worked, I found myself outside, watching Lizzie play in the yard with our neighbor's children. She looked so carefree, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. Hours passed before the detective reappeared. "We've found enough to initiate a full investigation. Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Parker. You'll be hearing from us soon." After they left, I was overwhelmed with a mix of relief and anticipation. This was another nail in Mike's coffin, another step toward justice. The next morning, I received a call from Derek. "Ellie, I wanted you to hear it from me. Mike's been arrested for fraud. The company's pressing charges." I closed my eyes, absorbing the news. "Thank you for letting me know, Derek." "This was inevitable," he sighed. "He crossed too many lines. Take care, Ellie." Mike's arrest unleashed a media frenzy. Cameras and reporters swarmed our neighborhood, seeking a statement. I kept a low profile, focusing on Lizzie and the life we were rebuilding. One evening, as I tucked Lizzie into bed, she looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mommy, is Daddy coming home?" I brushed her hair gently. "Not for a while, sweetheart, but you have me, and that's all we need right now." She nodded, trusting and innocent. "Okay, Mommy, I love you." "I love you too, Lizzie," I whispered, feeling the weight of my promise. I had to stay strong for her. Days turned into weeks. Mike's world continued to unravel. His assets were frozen, his accounts scrutinized. Cheryl tried to intervene, but her attempts were futile against the mounting evidence. I received a call from Kim one afternoon. "Ellie, it's Kim. Can we talk?" I hesitated, but curiosity and a need for closure prompted me. "Fine, come over." When she arrived, she looked worn. "I'm sorry for everything," she began, her voice shaky. "I didn't realize the extent of Mike's lies. He's ruined my life, too." I studied her, seeing the guilt and regret. "So what do you want from me?" "I just wanted to apologize and offer my support. What he did to both of us is unforgivable." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of solidarity with her. "Thank you, Kim, but Mike's actions have consequences, and we both have to live with that." As she left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Closure was coming, slowly but surely. Weeks later, the court verdict was in. Mike was found guilty of fraud and embezzlement. He faced years in prison, his reputation shattered, his life in ruins. Cheryl's health declined rapidly, and she moved into a care facility. Mike's network of lies had collapsed entirely. One afternoon, as Lizzie and I were playing in the yard, the sun shining brightly, I realized we had reached a turning point. "Mommy, are we okay now?" Lizzie asked, her innocence refreshing. "We are, Lizzie. We're better than okay," I said, scooping her into my arms. "This is our fresh start." She giggled, her laughter a sweet balm to my weary soul. For the first time in a long while, I felt the stirrings of hope. Our future was bright, untouched by the shadows of the past. Mike's downfall was complete, and in its wake we would rebuild, stronger than ever. The move to California was hectic but liberating. Lizzie and I left the shadows of our old life behind, embracing a fresh start. Our new home, a cozy bungalow bathed in sunshine, felt like hope personified. On the first day at her new school, Lizzie was nervous. "Do you think they'll like me, Mom?" I knelt to her level, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "They'll love you, Lizzie. Just be yourself." We walked into the school together, the hallways bustling with students. Mrs. Thompson, Lizzie's teacher, greeted us warmly. "We're so happy to have Lizzie join us." I watched Lizzie blend into her new classroom, her face lighting up with curiosity and excitement. I left, feeling lighter, hopeful for the first time in a long while. At my new job, the environment was invigorating. I dove into projects, the creativity and challenge renewing my spirit. My coworkers were friendly, and Jack, the head of our team, was especially kind. One afternoon, Jack invited me to lunch. We walked to a nearby cafe, the air filled with the scent of fresh coffee and pastries. "So how are you settling in?" Jack asked, his eyes warm and inviting. "Better than I expected. It's been a rocky year, but I feel like we're finally finding our footing," I replied. Jack nodded, his expression understanding. "New beginnings can be tough, but you seem strong. Lizzie's lucky to have you." "Thanks, Jack. It means a lot," I said, feeling a connection growing. Days turned into weeks. Lizzie thrived at school, making friends and excelling in her classes. Her laughter filled our home, a sweet reminder of our resilience. I found myself looking forward to work, where Jack's presence became a comforting constant. One Friday evening, Jack invited us over for a barbecue. "Bring Lizzie. It'll be fun," he said with a smile. At Jack's house, Lizzie played in the yard with his dog, her laughter echoing through the air. Jack and I stood by the grill, the smell of sizzling burgers making me feel at home. "You've created such a warm place here," I remarked, watching Lizzie chase the dog. "It's important to have a sanctuary," Jack replied, his tone sincere. "Everyone needs a safe place to heal." We sat on the patio, the evening turning cool. Jack turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "Ellie, I've seen the strength it's taken to get where you are. You're incredible." I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. "It's been a journey, but I couldn't let Mike's actions define us." "He doesn't deserve a second thought," Jack said firmly. "You and Lizzie deserve all the happiness in the world." As the night wrapped around us, I realized how much I had healed. Jack's kindness, Lizzie's laughter, our new life, it was more than I had hoped for. A few weeks later, as Lizzie and I walked along the beach, hand in hand, she looked up at me. "Mommy, do you think Daddy is sorry for what he did?" I paused, looking at the horizon. "Maybe. But what matters now is that we're happy. We're free to be ourselves." She nodded, her eyes bright. "I love our new life." "Me too, Lizzie," I said, squeezing her hand. "Me too." The sun set, casting a golden glow over the waves. I felt a deep sense of peace. Our past was behind us, replaced by a future filled with promise. Mike's deceit and cruelty no longer dictated our lives. We were free, resilient, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The journey had been long and painful, but it led us to this moment of pure, unadulterated happiness. And for that, I was profoundly grateful.
I stared at the letter in my hands, reading it for the fourth time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less absurd. The heavy cardstock paper, embossed with Davidson and Associates Legal Services, felt like it was burning my fingers. "My name is Marin, and my grandfather just posthumously challenged me to become a millionaire. $500,000 in 12 months, I muttered, sinking deeper into my mother's worn leather couch. What kind of twisted game is this? Mom appeared in the doorway of her kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You've been staring at that letter for 20 minutes. Want to tell me what's going on?" I cleared my throat. Remember how Grandpa Jack always said I had potential, but needed proper motivation? I made air quotes with trembling fingers. "Well, apparently, he left me an inheritance. $2 million. Mom's eyes widened. "That's unexpected." "Oh, it gets better." I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "I only get it if I can prove I've independently earned $500,000 within the next year. Otherwise, it all goes to charity." The dish towel dropped from her hands. "He what?" According to his lawyers, he called it incentivizing excellence. I stood up, pacing the familiar living room where I'd spent countless Sunday dinners. Who does this? Who dangles $2 million in front of their granddaughter, like some sort of twisted carrot? Mom's face did that thing where she's trying not to show emotion, but her eyes give everything away. Your grandfather had his own way of doing things. That's putting it mildly. I stopped at the mantel, picking up an old photo of Grandpa Jack at my college graduation. He was beaming, but now I could see something calculating in his eyes. "Did you know about this?" "No," she said quietly. "But I'm not surprised. Dad always thought struggle built character. He wasn't exactly thrilled when I married your father and chose to be a teacher instead of joining the family business." My phone buzzed. A text from Nolan. "Dinner at my parents' tonight. Mom's making her famous pot roast. Don't forget."
Great.
Just what I needed. An evening with my future mother-in-law, who already thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. I could picture Celeste Granger's perfectly manicured eyebrows rising when she heard about this inheritance challenge. "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, breaking into my thoughts. I set the photo down harder than necessary. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to earn that money." "Honey, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. $500,000 in a year? I've already got my online business bringing in decent money. With some expansion." I trailed off, mental calculations running wild. "Besides, this isn't just about the inheritance anymore. It's about proving something."
To whom?
"Your grandfather's already gone." To myself. I picked up my bag, suddenly energized. And to everyone who ever looked at me like I was just skating by on Nolan's family connections. Mom's expression softened. "Marin, sweetie, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." I hugged her quickly. "I have to go. Dinner with the Grangers awaits, and I need to figure out how to break this news to Nolan." As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. My handmade jewelry business had been steadily growing, but to hit $500,000 in profits within a year? I'd need to scale up dramatically, take risks, maybe even step on some toes. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Nolan. "Mom wants to know if you're still doing that crafting thing, or if you've considered the position at Dad's firm." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a plan beginning to form. Grandpa Jack wanted to motivate me?
Fine.
But he probably never imagined his challenge would end up completely reshaping not just my business, but every relationship in my life.
Game on, Grandpa.
Game on. The Grangers' dining room always felt like a museum, beautiful, cold, and full of things I wasn't supposed to touch. I sat rigid in my chair, the weight of Celeste's scrutiny heavier than the sterling silver fork in my hand. "So, Marin," Celeste said, cutting her pot roast with surgical precision, "Nolan tells me your little jewelry business is keeping you occupied." I caught Nolan's eye across the table, but he suddenly became very interested in his green beans. "Actually, I have some exciting news about that." My voice sounded too loud in the formal dining room. "I'm expanding the business. Significantly." Everett Granger looked up from his phone for the first time since dinner began. "Oh? And where are you securing the capital for this expansion?" Before I could answer, Celeste jumped in. "Darling, you're not asking Nolan to invest, are you? You know how I feel about mixing business with pleasure." "No," I said firmly, setting down my fork. "Actually, it's related to my grandfather's will. He left me an inheritance, but there's a condition attached. I need to earn $500,000 independently within the next year." The silence that followed was deafening. Nolan choked on his wine. $500,000? Celeste's perfectly plucked eyebrows arched toward her hairline. "From selling handmade trinkets." "They're artisanal pieces," Nolan corrected weakly, finally finding his voice. "And Marin's quite successful already." "Successful is relative, dear." Celeste dabbed her lips with her napkin. "Everett, didn't you mention there was an opening in the marketing department?" "I did." Everett nodded, finally pocketing his phone. "Good benefits, clear advancement path. Much more stable than entrepreneurship." My chest tightened. I appreciate the thought, but I'm committed to growing my own business. "Commitment is admirable," Celeste said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Though sometimes wisdom lies in knowing when to accept help, especially with a wedding to plan. I felt Nolan tense across the table. We hadn't even officially announced our engagement yet. "Mother," Nolan started. "I'm simply saying," Celeste continued, reaching for her wine glass, "that certain lifestyle expectations come with being a Granger. We wouldn't want anyone feeling overwhelmed." The pot roast turned to ash in my mouth. I'm quite capable of managing both my business and my personal life. Of course you are, dear. Celeste's smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I must ask, this inheritance condition, it seems rather convenient, doesn't it? My fork clattered against the plate. Excuse me? Mother, please, Nolan interrupted, but his protest sounded more like a whimper. I'm only looking out for everyone's interests, Celeste said. After all, we barely know anything about Marin's family. And now suddenly, there's this mysterious inheritance with specific conditions. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. My grandfather built his entire business from nothing. He believed in earning success, not inheriting it. The barb hit home. Celeste's face flushed. Well, we can certainly see where you get your ambitious nature. Marin, Nolan said softly, maybe we should. Should what, Nolan? I turned to him, waiting for him to defend me, to say anything meaningful. But he just sat there, trapped between his mother's expectations and my dignity. I stood up. Thank you for dinner, but I should go. I have an early meeting tomorrow with my business mentor. Oh yes, that little person, Celeste said. The one with the interesting background. I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking. At least he earned his success instead of marrying into it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Nolan's face went pale. Everett actually put his phone down. I'll walk you out, Nolan said quickly, but I was already heading for the door. Marin, wait, he called after me in the driveway. They mean well, they're just what, Nolan? Just trying to protect you from your gold-digging girlfriend? Just trying to maintain their precious family image. He ran his hands through his hair. You know it's not like that. Give them time. Time? I laughed bitterly. I have exactly 12 months to prove myself, Nolan. And I can't waste any more of it trying to win approval from people who've already decided I'm not good enough. I got in my car, leaving Nolan standing in the driveway, caught between two worlds. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a text from Lyle. Got some interesting news about potential investors. Coffee tomorrow. I smiled grimly. Celeste Granger had no idea what she was up against. Game on, indeed. The coffee shop buzzed with morning energy as Lyle slid a folder across the table to me. Remember that boutique in Singapore I mentioned? They want to place a major order. We're talking serious numbers here. I flipped through the purchase order, my heart racing. I did the quick math in my head. This could put me halfway to my goal. Exactly. Lyle leaned back, his usual confident smile faltering slightly. But there's something else you should see. He pulled up an email on his phone and handed it to me. As I read, my stomach dropped. Someone had been contacting my potential business partners, warning them about working with me. The email contained detailed concerns about my company's stability and hints about my questionable business practices. The timing is interesting, Lyle said carefully. Right after your dinner with the Grangers. My hands clenched around my coffee cup. Celeste. You can't prove it's her. I don't need to prove it. I know. I pushed the coffee aside, suddenly nauseated. She's trying to sabotage me. My phone buzzed. Nolan again. I'd been avoiding his calls since the dinner disaster 3 days ago. This time, I answered. Hey, he said, sounding tired. Can we talk? Mother wants to apologize. She's hosting a lunch for some of her charity board members today and specifically asked if you'd come. I caught Lyle's warning look. An apology lunch? Really? Please? It would mean a lot to me. 2 hours later, I walked into the country club's private dining room, wearing my most professional dress, the one that made me feel like I could conquer the world. Or at least survive lunch with Celeste Granger. Marin, darling. Celeste air-kissed my cheeks. I'm so glad you could join us. Ladies, this is Nolan's friend, Marin. Friend, not fiancé. I forced a smile as she introduced me to 3 impeccably dressed women who looked at me like I was a mildly interesting museum exhibit. Marin makes jewelry, Celeste explained, her tone suggesting I made macaroni necklaces in kindergarten. Though I hear she's trying to expand. How's that going, dear? Actually, I started, but one of the women, Barbara, cut in. Oh, Celeste mentioned something about that. Isn't there some inheritance situation? My blood froze. I looked at Celeste, who sipped her wine innocently. It came up in conversation, she said smoothly. We were all so concerned about the pressure you must be under, especially given your family's history. My family's history? Well, your father's gambling problems, dear. And those unfortunate business dealings. The room spun slightly. My father had struggled with addiction years ago, but he'd been clean for a decade. It was private family history that I'd only ever shared with Nolan. It's just, Celeste continued, we'd hate to see history repeat itself. Addiction can be genetic, you know, whether it's gambling or other compulsive behaviors. The other women nodded sympathetically. I stood up so quickly my water glass tipped over, spreading across the pristine white tablecloth like blood. I need to make a call, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Business emergency. In the hallway, I pulled up the Singapore boutique's email. Their concerns about my family history and financial stability suddenly made perfect sense. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyle. Singapore deals off. They heard some troubling rumors. Want to talk strategy? Another text came through, this time from Nolan. How's lunch going? Mother says you seem tense. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. Celeste wasn't just trying to drive me away from Nolan. She was actively trying to destroy my business, my reputation, my chance at the inheritance, all while maintaining her perfect society matron facade. Opening my eyes, I straightened my spine and typed a response to Lyle. Strategy meeting tomorrow. Time to fight fire with fire. If Celeste wanted to play dirty, fine. But she'd forgotten something crucial. I had nothing left to lose, and thanks to my grandfather's challenge, everything to gain. I walked back into the dining room, smile firmly in place. Sorry about that, ladies. Now, Celeste, you were saying something about family history? Let's talk about that. You want to do what? Lyle stared at me across his office desk, eyebrows raised. The morning sun through his window cast harsh shadows across the investment proposals spread between us. Launch a luxury line. High-end pieces, exclusive materials, limited collections. I pushed forward the market research I'd spent 3 sleepless nights compiling. We target the exact social circle Celeste thinks I don't belong in. It's risky, Lyle said, flipping through the numbers. You'd need to invest almost everything you've saved, plus take out loans. I know. And if it fails, I lose everything. I stood up, pacing the office. But if it works, I'll have proof that I belong in their world. On my own terms. My phone buzzed. Another message from Nolan. Mother's asking about wedding dates. Maybe we should start planning. I ignored it, focusing instead on the prototype jewelry pieces I'd brought. The centerpiece was a necklace that had taken me weeks to perfect, platinum and black diamonds arranged in a pattern that echoed my grandfather's company logo. Lal picked up the necklace, studying it. This is different from your usual style. It's evolution. I took the piece from him, the metal cool against my palm. I'm done making pretty trinkets. These pieces tell a story. Celeste's story? My story. I set the necklace down carefully. Did you know she's been calling my suppliers? 3 more backed out this week. Lyle's expression darkened. That's crossing a line. She crossed that line weeks ago. I pulled up an email on my phone. But look what I found while doing market research. Apparently, before marrying Everett, Celeste worked as a salesgirl at a department store jewelry counter. Interesting timing, considering the Grangers' annual charity gala is next month. Very interesting. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it, especially since I'd just received an invitation to showcase my new collection there. From Celeste. From Barbara Thompson, you know, one of her charity board friends. Turns out she was quite impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit at that lunch. I sat back down. Celeste doesn't know yet. The office door opened and Nolan walked in. My heart stopped. Surprise, he said weakly. Your assistant said you were here. Lyle stood smoothly. I'll give you 2 a moment. As he left, Nolan's eyes fell on the prototype necklace. That's different. It's for the new luxury line I'm launching. I watched his face carefully. The one your mother's been trying to sabotage. Marin, she's just protective. She's been calling my suppliers, spreading rumors about my family. My voice cracked slightly. And you've known about it, haven't you? His silence was answer enough. She mentioned something about checking into your background. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I told her it wasn't necessary, but you didn't stop her. I thought if she saw there was nothing to worry about, she'd accept you. I picked up the necklace, its weight suddenly significant. You know what's ironic? Your mother worked jewelry retail before meeting your father. She probably knows exactly how hard it is to build something from nothing. Nolan's face paled. How did you? Research. The same kind she's been doing on me. I moved toward the door. I'm showcasing at the charity gala next month. Will you be there? Of course, but he reached for my hand. Maybe we should wait on announcing the engagement. Give everyone time to adjust. I pulled away, my grandfather's challenge echoing in my head. Success wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proving I could stand on my own, even if it meant standing alone. You're right, I said quietly. We should wait. As I walked past him, Lal reappeared in the doorway. The investors are here, ready to present the new line. I straightened my spine, gripping my portfolio tighter. Actually, I have some last-minute changes to the business plan. Let's talk about exclusive distribution rights. Behind me, I heard Nolan leave without another word. Some battles you fight alone, and some victories you win for yourself. The ring felt heavy on my finger as I stared at the final production samples for my luxury line. Nolan had proposed last night, a quiet, almost apologetic affair at my apartment. Nothing like the grand gesture I'd once imagined. The timing's perfect, he'd said, sliding the family heirloom onto my finger. Maybe this will help Mother see you differently. My phone buzzed with another text from Lyle. Major problem with the gala showcase. Need to meet now. I found him pacing outside a downtown cafe, his usually calm demeanor shattered. They're pulling our spot in the showcase.
What?
Barbara promised. Barbara's been replaced as event chair. Lyle's expression was grim. Guess who's taking over? My stomach dropped. Celeste. She's restructuring the whole event. Your slot's been given to some French designer. I gripped the edge of a nearby table, my engagement ring catching the sunlight. She doesn't know about the proposal yet. Maybe that's why. Marin. A familiar voice cut through our conversation. I turned to see Iris walking toward us, shopping bags in hand. Her eyes fixed on my ring, widening in surprise. When did this happen? Last night. I touched the ring unconsciously. I was going to tell you. Over dinner tonight, I hope. Another voice joined us, Celeste, appearing like a perfectly coiffed ghost. Barbara trailing behind her looking apologetic. Celeste, I managed, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Congratulations on chairing the gala. Yes, well, someone needed to maintain certain standards. Her eyes flicked to my ring, then back to my face. Though I see congratulations are in order for you as well.
How?
Surprising that Nolan didn't mention his plans. It was spontaneous, I said, watching her expression carefully. Spontaneous. She tested the word like it was foreign. Rather like your last-minute addition to our showcase. Barbara was quite enthusiastic about your involvement. Unfortunately, we've had to make some changes. Due to maintaining standards? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Celeste's smile tightened. Due to experience. The gala has a certain reputation to uphold. We can't risk featuring untested designers, especially those with questionable business practices. Iris stepped forward. Excuse me? Oh, you haven't heard? Celeste's voice dripped with false concern. There are some troubling rumors about financial irregularities in Marin's business. Anonymous tips to the business bureau, that sort of thing. My vision blurred at the edges. You're investigating my business? The board has a duty to protect our donors' interests. She adjusted her designer bag. Though I'm sure everything will sort itself out. Eventually, Nolan always did have a soft spot for rehabilitation projects. That's enough. Iris's voice cut through the tension. My daughter has accepted my son's proposal, Celeste interrupted smoothly. Which makes this a family matter. Speaking of which, dinner tonight at 7? We should start discussing wedding plans. Something small and private might be best, given the circumstances. I looked down at my ring, then at the production samples in my bag, pieces I'd poured my heart and savings into, designed to prove I belonged in their world. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. "You're right," I said quietly. "This is a family matter." I slipped the ring off my finger and held it out to her. "Give this back to Nolan. Tell him I'm sorry, but I can't marry someone who lets his mother fight his battles." "Maren," Barbara started, but I was already walking away. "The showcase starts at 8. I called over my shoulder. "I'll see you there." "You've been removed from the program," Celeste reminded me, her voice sharp. I turned back, smiling for the first time since she'd arrived. "Check your email." Barbara wasn't the only board member impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit. And unlike you, I earned my spot in that showcase. Just like I earned everything else in my life. As I walked away, I heard Lyle hurrying to catch up. "Please tell me you have a plan." "Oh, I do." I pulled out my phone, dialing a number I'd been saving. "Remember those investors who are interested in exclusive distribution rights? Tell them I'm ready to talk. And Lyle, make sure they understand exactly who they're dealing with." The game had changed. Celeste wanted to play hardball.
Fine.
But she'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was fighting for my future, on my own terms. The charity gala sparkled with wealth and pretension, exactly as I remembered from previous years. Only this time, I wasn't here as Nolan's plus one. I was here as competition. "They're setting up your display in the East Wing," Lyle murmured, appearing at my elbow. Celeste tried to have it moved to the service corridor, but the other board members overruled her. I smoothed down my black dress, the one I designed my signature necklace to complement. "And the investors? Front row for your presentation." Across the room, I caught Celeste holding court. Her perfectly coiffed head bent towards several society matrons. The whispers had already started, about my broken engagement, about the suspicious timing of my business expansion. "Maren." Nolan's voice behind me made my spine stiffen. "Can we talk?" I turned to find him looking lost in his tuxedo, the one I'd helped him choose months ago. "About what?" "How you let your mother sabotage my business. Or how you propose thinking it would fix everything." "It's not that simple." "Miss Calloway?" A server appeared with a tablet. "There's an issue with your display. Something about the security system." I followed her to find my entire collection locked behind a malfunctioning display case. The security code had been changed. "Technical difficulties?" Celeste's voice dripped with false concern. "How unfortunate. Perhaps this is a sign you're not quite ready for this level of showcase." "I've got it handled," I said, but my hands were shaking as I tried another override code.
Do you?
"Like you had your engagement handled?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Did you really think returning Nolan's ring would make you look noble? All it did was prove what I've known all along. You're not one of us." "You're right." I straightened up, meeting her gaze. "I'm not one of you. I'm better." Her eyes narrowed. "Your presentation starts in 10 minutes. Without your collection, what exactly do you plan to show these people?" "The truth." I pulled out my phone, sending a pre-prepared signal to Lyle. The lights dimmed, and the massive screens around the ballroom flickered to life. There I was in my workshop crafting pieces from raw materials. Then came the sales figures, the growth charts, the international orders. "What is this?" Celeste hissed. "My story," I said, as images of my grandfather's company logo dissolved into my new designs. But here's the interesting part. The screens shifted to show a young woman behind a jewelry counter, circa 1985. Celeste's face drained of color. "Amazing what you can find in department store archives," I said quietly, especially when the salesgirl went on to marry the owner's son 6 months later. "You had no right. Like you had no right to investigate my family? To spread rumors about my business." My voice carried just far enough to draw attention. "The difference is I earned everything I have. Can you say the same?" The ballroom had gone silent. All eyes on us. Nolan stepped forward, finally finding his voice. "Mother? What's she talking about?" But before Celeste could answer, another figure emerged from the crowd. Everett Granger, looking thunderous. "Celeste," he said, his voice carrying. "Is this true? Did you meet me while working as a salesgirl?" The silence was deafening. In that moment, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, watching Celeste's carefully constructed world crumble, I felt hollow. "I think," Ever continued, "we need to discuss some things. Privately." As they left, Nolan caught my arm. "Maren, wait. Don't." I pulled away. "Just don't." I walked to the podium, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The investors were waiting. My collection was still locked away. But as I faced the crowd, I realized something. I'd won the battle. But at what cost? "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady despite the chaos in my heart. "Tonight, I was going to show you a jewelry collection. Instead, I'm going to tell you a story about legacy, about truth, and about the price of revenge." Behind me, the screen showed my grandfather's challenge letter. Sometimes winning feels an awful lot like losing. But I was done playing by anyone else's rules, including my own. The investors loved my presentation. My phone buzzed with commitments and contracts before I even left the stage. But as the applause faded, all I could focus on was Nolan's empty chair in the front row. I found him in the garden, staring at the fountain where we'd first met 2 years ago. "Your presentation was incredible," he said without turning around. "You're going to hit your grandfather's goal." "That's all you have to say?" He finally faced me, his expression torn. "What do you want me to say, Maren? That you were right about Mother? That I should have defended you? I wanted you to choose me." My voice cracked. "Just once, I wanted you to choose me. By humiliating my family? By exposing my mother's past. She tried to destroy everything I built. And now you've destroyed everything she built." He ran his hands through his hair. "Do you know what this will do to my father's business? To our family's reputation?" A quiet voice behind us made us both jump. The truth rarely destroys anything worth keeping. Celeste stood there, her perfect makeup slightly smeared. She looked smaller somehow, more human. "Mother," Nolan started, but she held up a hand. "I came from nothing," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I worked that jewelry counter for 6 years before meeting your father, and I was good at it. But in this world," she gestured to the glittering gala behind us. "In this world, the past is a weapon. So you used mine against me," I said. "I used whatever I could to protect what I'd built." She met my eyes. "Just like you did tonight. The difference is..." "There is no difference." She stepped closer. "We're exactly alike, Maren. That's what terrifies me." The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. In trying to prove I wasn't like them, I'd become exactly what I despised. "Your father knows everything now," Celeste continued. "About my past, about what I did to sabotage your business. He's reevaluating things." "Mother, he loves you," Nolan protested. "Yes, but love without trust is just another pretty piece of jewelry. All shine, no substance." She turned to me. "You've won, Maren. The investors, the showcase, your grandfather's challenge, it's all yours. But tell me, was revenge everything you hoped it would be?" I thought about my grandfather's letter, about his challenge to prove myself. Had I proved myself, or had I just proved I could be as ruthless as anyone else? "I never wanted revenge," I said quietly. "I just wanted to belong."
No.
Nolan's voice was firm. "You wanted to win, and now you have. Congratulations." He walked away, leaving me alone with Celeste. We stood in silence, two women who'd fought so hard for acceptance that we'd forgotten what we were fighting for. "Your collection," she finally said. "The one locked in the display case? The override code is my wedding date. The day I thought I'd finally made it, finally belonged." She smiled sadly. "Ironic, isn't it?" As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone once told me that true legacy isn't about what you have, it's about what you leave behind." She paused. "Your grandfather was right about one thing, Maren. You do have potential. Don't waste it proving points to people who've already lost their way." I watched her disappear into the gala, then pulled out my phone. The investment numbers were staggering, more than enough to claim my inheritance. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "You okay?" I looked at the fountain, remembering simpler times. The water sparkled under the garden lights, each droplet catching and reflecting something different, something true. "No," I typed back. But I think I finally understand what Grandpa's challenge was really about. It was never about the money. It was about learning the difference between winning and succeeding, between revenge and redemption, between belonging and becoming. I had some decisions to make. 6 months after the gala, I stood in my grandfather's study, now part of my mother's house. The lawyer placed 2 documents on the desk, proof of my earnings and the inheritance paperwork. "Congratulations, Miss Calloway," he said. "You've met all conditions of the will." I stared at the papers but didn't reach for them. Instead, I pulled out a 3rd document from my bag. "I'd like to make some changes." Mom looked up from her spot by the window. "Marin, I'm establishing a foundation," I explained, "for young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. The inheritance will fund it." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "All of it, except for one piece." I touched the necklace at my throat, the one from my luxury line, redesigned with a new purpose. This design is being mass-produced now. Affordable versions for working women who want something beautiful but practical. Something earned, not inherited. The doorbell rang and Mom went to answer it. She returned looking puzzled, followed by Celeste Granger. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Celeste said, looking different in simple slacks and a sweater. Gone was the society matron armor. "We were just finishing some paperwork," I said. "Yes, I heard about your success." She smiled slightly. "Everett and I have been following your company's growth." He's impressed. "And you?" "I'm learning to be impressed by different things these days." She set a small box on the desk, like courage and grace. Inside the box was a worn jewelry price tag from 1985, bearing her employee number. "My first sale," she explained. "I kept it to remind myself where I came from. Somewhere along the way, I started hiding from it instead." "And Nolan?" I asked, though I already knew he'd taken a job across the country. "Finding his own way, finally." She touched the price tag gently. "Sometimes losing everything helps you find what matters." "I'm donating the inheritance," I said, surprising myself by sharing this, "to help others build something of their own." "Your grandfather would be proud." She reached for her purse. "And so would mine. He was a janitor, remember? He always said true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give." As she turned to leave, she paused. "The spring charity gala needs a new chairperson. Someone who understands both sides of the jewelry counter." I thought about declining, about maintaining the safe distance I'd built. But maybe bridges were better than walls. "I'll think about it," I said. After she left, Mom wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You okay?"
Yeah.
I picked up the inheritance paperwork, then the foundation documents. You know, when Grandpa set this challenge, I thought it was about proving myself to everyone else. But it was never about them, was it? "Your grandfather had his flaws," Mom said, "but he knew what you needed better than you did. Sometimes the hardest person to prove yourself to is yourself." I signed the foundation papers, watching my signature dry. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyle about our latest sales figures, another record month. But those numbers didn't matter as much anymore. "Want to get lunch?" Mom asked. "That new cafe downtown?" "Actually," I said, gathering my things, "I was thinking about that little diner where you and Grandpa used to go. The one with the terrible coffee and the great stories." She smiled, understanding. "Perfect." As we left, I glanced at my reflection in the study window. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd opened that lawyer's letter a year ago. She was stronger, wiser, and maybe a little scarred. But mostly, she was herself. My phone buzzed again, an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "From one salesgirl to another." Inside was a list of small jewelry businesses owned by women from humble backgrounds, all struggling to break into the high-end market. I smiled, thinking about bridges and counters and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. And sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you inherit, but what you choose to build.
She was like a younger, ostentatious female boss to me. She was caught in a sudden shower, and I saw her real face. She looks up at me and asks provocatively, "Do you want to see more?" I find myself holding my breath. "Do you want to come to my place?" When she blurted these words out, her response was, "I'm Michael Collins, and this year I turned 28. Please be patient with me while I briefly discuss my upbringing and life's journey." "I have it all from birth." "Oh, that one," would be the admiring response from everyone if I mentioned the name of the company I've worked for. I was born the son of the company's president. My parents adored me without showing any preference, despite the fact that I was the second son. By the time I completed primary school, it had already been settled that my older brother would inherit my father's company. I had to choose my own route then. My parents shared a strong commitment to education. Fortunately, I did better in my studies than the majority of my classmates, so I didn't detest it. About the time I was in high school, I came to the realization that I was inherently smart, perhaps just like my father. A gift I never took for granted despite being born with. I worked hard to live up to my parents' expectations. A part of me thought I was just a little bit superior to my brother. Despite his kindness, I saw him as just another male. His benevolence was the only thing that set him apart. "That's a big deal," my mother observed, but I wasn't happy with my brother, the one who carried all the burdens of our parents and grandparents and was expected to take over the business despite my superior ability. I must have been a prickly, conceited man back then. Now that I think about it, it was awkward. I consider it a youthful mistake. I sincerely hoped that one day my parents would see my brilliance and replace their hair, but that day never materialized. After graduating from university, I wasn't too excited about job seeking because I had such bad intentions. Nevertheless, over 10 companies, including my top pick, sent me job offers. I was set to make my first move as a working adult, even though I was still not happy about the inheritance issue. That's when I had my first failure in life. My initial choice of employer was a well-known advertising agency. There were a lot of wealthy kids like myself when I joined. I, the person who was always the center of attention, was swiftly forgotten. The strange feeling of not being the center of attention unsettled me. I started to feel more and more nervous that I would not be able to control the scenario the way I had imagined. My natural haughtiness got in the way, and I disregarded the advice of my colleagues, making a grave error. Less than half a year passed before I made a fatal error. "I can handle everything on my own," I reasoned. It was an error brought about by my conceited notion. I just stared blankly as my boss apologizing to clients and my coworkers frantically covering for me. That was when I was shattered. The following day, I turned in my resignation. I never returned to work. I no longer wanted to socialize or meet new people who were aware of my existence. My anxious parents made arrangements for me to live in an apartment separately from our family house. I was evicted from my home and sought safety in an apartment that was made available to me. I started going outside after half a year, but I wasn't in the mood to look for a work. I had no job. I made it a daily goal to live a lazy life. I made the decision to live a life that totally rejected the person I used to be. I lived like this for a couple of years. I'd attribute my ability to reintegrate into society to a string of fortuitous little incidents. Movies were my only source of enjoyment throughout this period. My apartment was close to an art house movie theater. They screened foreign films, including some relatively obscure ones. At the conclusion of the year, they also screened all-night films in this little theater. It was a fine art house theater with strong ties to the neighborhood. One day, while purchasing a ticket as normal, I noticed an employment poster at the front desk. "Are you hiring staff?" As soon as I had my ticket, I inquired. I was informed that they had an unexpected vacancy and were hiring immediately. I was unaware of the kind of work that art house cinemas did at the time. When they said, "If you like movies, it's a fun job," I became interested right away. Applying for the job was my decision. My resume was brought the following day. I spoke with the manager of the theater right away, and I was hired right away. I remember being a little afraid, but everything went so well. In case it turned out to be a really severe firm, I was concerned about what to do. The day after the interview was when I was supposed to start work when I got back to my apartment. I was apprehensive about the nature of the work. It appeared like my job was just sales and publicity on the first day. Creating leaflets and posters, as well as displays within the theater and outdoors, were all part of the publicity activity. Sales comprised buying and promoting the movies that were going to be exhibited. Each member of the small crew was responsible for several responsibilities. "Hello, this is Michael Collins." I lowered my head and said "nice to meet you" to my supervisor, a girl who had a doll-like appearance. She actually did look like a small girl, yet I suppose I should label her a woman still. Her age, she was 5 years younger than me, surprised me once more. The manager of the movie theater confided in me that she was a part-time employee and had dropped out of high school. She appeared to have started working here after being asked whether she would like to work full-time after working many part-time jobs. After then, her efforts were reported to be enormous. They added that all the movies she bought were hits and that she had good taste at first. She is now a well-known great buyer in the business. My training was under her and the cinema manager's supervision. I obtained a younger boss in this way. With a younger girl as my employer, a week flew by. During that time, I soon learned about her powers. My acquired talents from my time as a student were useless. Every day, I would mentally torture myself over my incapacity. The manager of the movie theater advised, "Take your time to learn." However, I was proud to be an older guy and a man. My zeal ultimately turned into a wheel that invited failure. Her nickname for me was Junker each time it occurred. Junker quickly became my alias. I understood she was referring to me in a loving manner, so it wasn't sarcasm. However, being referred to as a Junker was also an embarrassment to me because I had been succeeding handily. "One day, I'll exact my revenge," I said to myself. This sensation would encourage my next error. Claire, my supervisor, is a doll-like beauty. Her white complexion and petite stature give her a delicate overall appearance. But over the past week, I've come to understand her strong inner nature all too well. In general, everyone at this place of employment is very eccentric. Frequently, the discussions held here border on sarcasm. I honestly believed at first that I had chosen the wrong job. But after I'd watched everyone for a bit, I became aware of how foolish my assumptions had been. Everyone is genuinely dedicated to their profession, and what may seem like hurtful jokes isn't meant to be taken that way. Arguments may arise as a result, but they will only last so long. No one participates in conversations that flatly contradict the views of others. They listened to my views even as a novice and offered suggestions with a hint of humor. In an environment where there's no need to put on a front of being well-versed in everything, employees seem to grow at a different rate. "Michael, had you finished ordering the flyers?" Claire gave me directions the moment she got back from the client meeting. "Everything is well. The submission has been completed." Claire responded, "Not bad, for a Junker," and set a gift on my desk, a convenience store cafe latte. She must have recalled that I only ever drink this while we're on a call outside. There were voices of discontent from the other desks. "Why don't we get anything?" "Stop acting like a baby. Proceed to purchase it on your own." Claire is tenacious even when everyone else is older. She is practically the most powerful person here because she is just as severe with the theater manager. The theater manager laughed it off, adding, "That's just how it is with newbies, even though I feel a little privileged." I can't let people younger than me spoil me all the time. I made a promise to myself as I sipped my cafe coffee. One aspect of my work is sales. Claire was with me when I had an outside sales job one day. I was a little anxious because this was my first time going out with Claire, even though I had gone out a few times with the theater manager. We went to a few ticket offices and bookstores so that I could get used to traveling alone in the future. The weather was pleasant, and it had been sunny since the morning, but after we had visited approximately 5 locations, the sky began to go darker. It could pour. She inquired, "Do you have an umbrella?" "I don't usually carry one." Claire threw a worried glance up at the cloudy sky. It dawned on me that I had never seen her hold an umbrella. Just as I was going to inquire as to why she hadn't, a torrential downpour struck, an unexpected deluge. We were unable to take action in the matter. We were caught in the midst of a crosswalk and had to run. We were saturated even though we were able to hide from the rain under a store awning. We were drenched from head to toe in a matter of seconds. Claire made a frustrated clicking sound with her tongue. She removed her damp hair with a napkin, wearing an annoyed expression. The rain appeared to have somewhat smudged her makeup. She kicked my leg angrily and exclaimed, "This sucks." "I'm not the one who made it rain, you know," I said. There was unease in my gaze as I glanced down at Claire. Her face had a distinct quality to it. I believe her makeup was smeared, but something wasn't quite right. Upon thorough observation, I discovered the source of the discomfort. "Odd, Claire, did you have beauty marks under your eye?" Usually, she needs to cover them up with concealer or foundation. Her left eye had 3 lines of beauty marks. I got a slight thrill, like though I had just uncovered a secret about Miller. "Want to see more?" As she glanced up at me and spoke, my heart skipped a beat. It was quite seductive. These suddenly visible beauty marks had me completely enamored. I know full well that I always had a fascination for beauty marks. I involuntarily leaned in closer to Claire and gave her a downward glance. "Would you like to visit my home? This is not far from it." Claire's face flushed crimson red at what I said. I also began to experience some embarrassment. I'd attempted to defuse the situation, but before I could speak, I was quickly kicked in the shin. "Sorry." "Hey, why did you do that?" "Cease talking. What a yunker you are." Claire spat out these furious words, stopped talking nonsense, and hurried off, leaving me crouched in misery. She would be drenched when she arrived home because the rain hadn't stopped. I'm hoping she avoids getting a cold. I became concerned. Claire had evidently gone straight home and wasn't back at the office the next morning when I returned to the movie theater. Claire had a somewhat icy attitude. She was consciously staying away from me. Her welcomes were a little forced, and she refused to look at me. She delegated duties to other seniors even when I attempted to talk about it. I was being methodically barred from her domain. I was being questioned by other staff members. "Hey, what did you do to her?" Things became awkward as a result. I managed to catch up with Claire during the lunch break, but she refused to acknowledge me. I approached Claire in a corridor nook, hidden from other employees' view. "Why are you avoiding me?" "I'm not trying to avoid you." She stared up at me. "You're just imagining things, yunker," and I couldn't help but think back to what had transpired the day before. The 3 hidden beauty marks resurfaced when I gave Claire's left eye a gentle thumb massage. Unaffected by my touch, she gave me a sneer in return. My recollection began to reel backwards. These beauty marks were not new to me. This occurred during my time as a college student. I was conceited and unlikable then. I believed I was infallible and couldn't fathom failing. My social club and my studies felt like fun, and I wasted a lot of time there. Our club frequently went to this bar, which was decorated in the Italian style and was quite posh, ideal for courting women. We were using a mixer that day. 4 girls and 3 friends. I believe the majority of the girls showed interest in me. When my friend saw it, he became irritated. I believe he would be better off improving himself if he was going to become irritated, but he didn't seem to be that kind of person. To make matters worse, he began flirting with the young waiter who carried our lunch. The girl, who appeared to be in her high school years, was obviously uncomfortable and blushing. She had multiple piercings and pixie-cut hair that had been dyed silver. Because of the way she looked, I assumed that she could be a little rebellious. I thought she could resist the flirting, but I quickly learned that looks can be deceiving. She was unable to correct the customer too severely because she was truly upset. It didn't seem like she had the experience needed to handle things well. Seeing this, I gave the doll-like beauty sitting next to me a little signal with my eyes to hold on for a while. I had been trying to win her over. Hey, that's enough. You see she's upset, don't you? My companion was leaning toward the waitress when I reached out and grabbed him by the collar. I was able to instruct the waitress to go ahead and leave while he was thrashing around. You've gone too far, dude. I laughed and diffused the tension by giving my pal a shoulder pat. I saw the waitress bowing to me repeatedly from behind the counter. 3 little moles were visible beneath her eyes. Yes, it is correct. I remember now. Wait, the waitress from that Italian bar. Claire snapped her tongue sharply at my cry. Before I graduated, I had gone to that bar a lot. I must have seen that expression innumerable times. Aren't you going to marry that doll-like girl? Claire asked without warning. She must be referring to my college girlfriend, who had a striking resemblance to Claire. As I gave it some thinking, I had the epiphany. It's unbelievable. Claire, I may be misinterpreting, but is that costume a cosplay? I moaned as soon as I felt a stinging pain in my chin. Claire had given me a headbutt that had struck my chin. The pain made me crouch on the spot, and Claire stood triumphantly above me. Select your words wisely, young lady, she brashly exclaimed, glancing down at me and clicking her tongue as she turned to leave. It sounded to me like someone said, "Thanks for back then." Cinema manager, I have something to ask you. I yelled as I stormed into the movie theater manager's office. The manager of the movie theater smiled and remarked, "Oh, you know now." He told me that the reason he hired me was because Claire asked him to. It seems that she begged him to hire me since, although I had assisted her in the past as her first love, I was now unemployed and having difficulties. It seems like they coordinated the employment advertisements with my ticket purchase. Every employee at this art house cinema has performed a role in me. Claire tried to dress like the girl I was dating at the time since she recalled me. She clarified that while it wasn't quite cosplay, it was close. The manager of the movie theater chuckled as he informed me that Claire had promised them all to keep her appearance alteration and everything else a secret. Claire had done all the organizing. How twisted, and yet, I felt, how charming she was. Claire had returned to the girl I knew the day after. Her black hair appears to have been a wig. If she'd shown up looking like this for our reunion, slim black leggings, a white t-shirt, and a very short haircut with plenty of piercings, I would have known it was Claire. Claire pretended as if nothing had happened, totally back to her previous self. While she was eating a croissant at her desk over lunch, I questioned her softly. "So, I heard I was your first love. Have you ever found me attractive?" Claire clicked her tongue and shot me a cold look. She then averted her gaze and declared, "I hate you now." Her less than sweet remark took me by surprise, and I found myself saying, "What?" Then Claire turned to face me, a naughty smirk on her face. "You're a real younker, you know." Her lips turned a little crimson. "Well, I suppose I had better stop being a younker before then. After I do, will you kindly reconsider?" I was petting Claire's head when I felt a headbutt strike my side. I stayed stooped, groaning, and contorted in agony. As she left the office, she added, "You're so cheeky for a younker," before turning around. "I guess I can wait, though." She added some words in a tiny voice, but I didn't miss them. It seemed so far off that day she would be standing next to me in a wedding gown. So, what were your thoughts? Having a channel subscription inspires me to produce more stuff. I'll see you in the upcoming video.
Hello everyone, I am Robert. My parents tried to give my inheritance to their favorite daughter, but my grandparents had a surprising twist in store. I am a 28-year-old male who comes from a family with a convoluted and long history of favoritism. My younger sister, Nancy, who is 25, has always been preferred by my parents, especially my dad, starting from our childhood. This partiality only got worse as we grew up. Nancy was the golden child from my earliest memories. For example, our parents threw her an elaborate birthday party, complete with professional face painters, a bouncy castle, and a petting zoo, when I was 5 and she was 2. That same year, I only had a store-bought cake and a little family supper for my birthday. This helped to define the tone for years to come. The differences became clearer as we aged. Nancy always received the newest toys, the greatest clothes, and the most attention. I recall saving months of my allowance to buy a new bike when I was 10 years old. Nancy saw it and wanted one too. Instead of teaching her about waiting or saving, my parents went right out and bought her an even nicer bike than mine. Another area where the bias was evident was in school. My parents attended all of Nancy's school functions while they usually missed mine. I took the front stage in a school play in the 4th grade. I practiced for weeks, driven by great enthusiasm. My parents arrived an hour late on the night of the play, missing my major scene. They were consoling Nancy after she complained of a stomach ache, though she was fine later on. They simply lost track of time playing with her. Regarding academics, nothing I ever did seemed sufficient. I joined the math club, often received straight A's in middle school, and even took first place in a regional science fair. My parents hardly noticed these successes. Meanwhile, they gave Nancy a celebratory dinner and purchased her a new phone as encouragement when she scored a B+ on one test in her weakest subject. High school was particularly difficult. With an eye toward their approval, I put myself into whatever activity I could, all while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I was the editor of the school newspaper and the debate team captain. Nancy, on the other hand, coasted through school, barely maintaining a C average and spending much of her time hanging out with friends. I was chosen as one of 2 junior-year applicants from our university to participate in a prestigious summer program at Harvard. It was such an honor, and I felt great. When I shared the news over supper, my dad grumbled and quickly shifted the topic to Nancy's forthcoming dance performance. At least my mother remarked, "That's nice," but she moved on fast. My parents couldn't even bring me to the airport when Nancy's concert fell on the same day I was leaving for Harvard. They wanted to see Nancy perform, so I asked the parents of a friend for a ride. Another agonizing experience was the college application process. I worked for months on improving my essays, engaged in extracurricular activities, and prepared rigorously. Several elite colleges accepted me, and I was given a sizable scholarship to my ideal college. When I told my parents about this over supper, their reaction was barely passable. "That's good, but don't let it get to your head. College isn't everything," my dad advised. My mother added, "Just remember about us when you're off becoming a big shot." On the other hand, my parents were quite understanding when Nancy barely passed high school and chose not to attend college. They admired her for knowing herself and for defying social expectations, something they never did for me. They even bought her a car as a graduation gift. Emotionally, this persistent favoritism affected me greatly over my teens and early 20s. I battled anxiety and despair and began therapy in college. I came to realize that my parents' actions were not my fault. Years of effort were needed to build my self-esteem and learn to validate myself rather than depend on my parents' approval. My immediate family did not help me, yet I still managed to lead a decent life. By the time I graduated from college with honors, I had a decent job in finance and even purchased my own house by 27 years old. Though my parents weren't proud, I was glad for what I had accomplished. Here is where the current drama begins. On my dad's side, my grandfather passed away not too long ago. He left a sizable estate and was a successful businessman who started from nothing. In his will, he split his possessions equally among his grandchildren, including me, Nancy, and our cousins, as well as his children, my dad and his siblings. My portion of the inheritance was significant, roughly $500,000. It would have allowed me to invest in my future, pay off my education loans, and perhaps even launch my own company someday. This unanticipated windfall and the opportunities it could present made me happy. However, when the will was read, my parents clearly became agitated. Later, they pulled me aside and told me that they felt it was unjust for me to receive an equal portion. Nancy, who lives in our parents' basement and works part-time at a coffee shop, said she needed the money more since she was struggling. Though stunned, I tried to remain calm. I clarified that Grandpa made this decision and that they had no say in how he divided his estate. They insisted I should act morally and give Nancy my share. When I declined, they became enraged and began guilt-tripping me, calling me ungrateful and selfish. My dad started recalling every instance where they had helped me, even though I worked part-time to help with finances. He emphasized paying for my medically necessary braces, buying me school supplies, the bare minimum, and allowing me to reside at home during college. He conveniently forgot about the car they bought Nancy, the many shopping sprees, and the fact that they still support her at 25. The matter escalated quickly. Acting as the will's executor, my dad decided to handle things himself. He declared that he would interpret Grandpa's intentions and give Nancy my entire portion. He claimed that Grandpa would have wanted this if he had known our unique situation. I was devastated. What my parents attempted was not only illegal but also a painful reminder of how little they thought of me. I pointed out that Grandpa had always treated all his grandchildren equally and that he was aware of our circumstances. I tried to reason with them, but my mother accused me of speaking ill of the deceased by implying that Grandpa would have preferred anything other than what my dad was advocating. I shared certain memories of Grandpa supporting my academic and career goals, but my parents dismissed them as misunderstandings. They insisted that Grandpa wanted to ensure Nancy was taken care of and had privately expressed concerns about her future. When I asked why he hadn't drafted the will that way, they had no response. Nancy, for her part, seemed awkward about the situation but didn't criticize our parents. She merely shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad know best." When I tried to talk to her alone, it was clear she wasn't going to be much help. Feeling misled and hurt, I turned to Grandpa's widow, my paternal grandmother, for guidance. Hearing what was happening, she was enraged. She informed me that my parents had no authority to alter the will and that this was exactly what Grandpa had not wanted. Grandma sent some documents that clarified the situation. Several years ago, my parents had asked Grandpa to leave everything to Nancy in his will. Grandpa had steadfastly refused, saying he believed all his grandchildren should be treated equally. He even included a clause in his will stating that anyone challenging the fair distribution would lose their share. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted my parents. Grandma's revelation of their previous attempt to influence the will stunned them. They tried to justify their actions by saying they were only looking out for Nancy's future, but I could see the guilt on their faces. Grandma took immediate action. She contacted the will's other executors and the family attorney. She also reached out to my dad's siblings, who shared her strong disapproval of what he was trying to do. Together, they stopped my dad's scheme and ensured that the will would be carried out as intended. Although my parents are unhappy with me, they were forced to back off. They argued that I should have handled this in-house instead of involving others and accused me of turning the family against them. My mother cried, saying that I had split the family and betrayed them. I told her I had never expected anything from them anyway. In response, my dad threatened to cut me out of their will entirely if I accepted the inheritance. He went so far as to suggest that I would not be welcome in their home should I inherit. In a particularly low blow, my mother remarked that accepting the money proved I never truly loved them and that I was just waiting to profit from their deaths. This situation has divided the extended family. A few of my cousins have been supportive, as they understand the long-standing favoritism and appreciate me standing up for myself. Others, however, believe I should have backed down to preserve peace, arguing that family harmony should come before financial considerations. Although my dad's siblings are firmly on my side, This conflict has strained their relationship with my parents as well. Nancy, unfortunately, is caught in the middle of it all. She confided in me privately that, while she feels bad and didn't ask for any of this, she isn't ready to challenge our parents. She's been conditioned her whole life to depend on them and seek their approval. I don't blame her entirely, but a part of me wishes she would support me just once. This ordeal has brought back a lot of past pain and resentment. I find myself remembering all the times I was overlooked or dismissed in favor of Nancy. The birthday celebrations I missed, the school events my parents skipped, the achievements that went unnoticed. This one incident seems to be bringing a lifetime of unfairness to the surface. Although this conflict has created a great divide in the family, I am standing my ground and intend to take my inheritance as Grandpa intended. My parents barely speak to me now, and family gatherings have become tense and awkward. Last week, I missed our monthly family meal for the first time ever because I couldn't bear the cold shoulders and accusing glares. Despite the turmoil, a small part of me feels empowered. For the first time in my life, I am confronting the unfair treatment from my parents. I'm asserting my value and refusing to be dismissed. It's both terrifying and liberating at once. Even though I believe I'm in the right, the family drama is exhausting. I haven't felt this overwhelmed since college, and I've started experiencing anxiety attacks again. To help manage this stress, I'm considering going back to therapy. Am I wrong for standing up to my parents and accepting my inheritance? Should I have just handed everything over to Nancy to keep the peace? While I'm tired of being the family scapegoat, I also fear losing my family entirely. Any advice or perspective would be deeply appreciated. Update. Since my initial post 6 months ago, a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and guidance. It truly kept me strong during these trying circumstances. Let me start with the legal aspect of things. Many of you advised me to consult my own attorney, and I did. He confirmed that I had every right to inherit and that what my dad attempted was, in fact, illegal. He helped me record everything and was ready to act legally, should the need arise. Fortunately, things did not transpire that way. Along with my dad's siblings, my grandma and her attorney worked out the matters without involving the court. I got my entire fortune, and the will was carried out exactly as intended. Due to his attempts at will manipulation, my dad was removed as an executor. This was a somewhat demanding process spanning several weeks. My parents threatened litigation. There were tense meetings and furious phone calls, but ultimately, the law was unambiguous, and they had to back off. The family fallout, however, has been noteworthy. At first, my parents doubled down on their viewpoint, accusing me of being avaricious and neglectful of my sister. They also sought to mobilize other family members against me, spreading allegations that I had somehow coerced Grandpa into giving me money. Luckily, most of the family saw through their trickery. About a month after the will's acceptance, there was one particularly unpleasant occurrence at a family gathering. My parents showed up unannounced. My aunt was hosting and hadn't invited them. They started a scene, shouting about how I had taken from Nancy and corrupted Grandma against her. My dad claimed that I had ruined all these wonderful memories, and my mother flung an old photo album squarely at my feet. It was awkward and terrible. It took several relatives to calm things down and persuade my parents to leave. Bless her heart, my grandmother turned out to be my most powerful supporter through all of this. She shared stories of how my grandfather had always been proud of my achievements and how he especially wanted to ensure that all his grandchildren had equal opportunities. She even revealed that Grandpa had maintained a scrapbook of my accomplishments, including newspaper clippings of academic honors, copies of my college acceptance letters, and even the program from a university play my parents had been late to attend. This insight was both sad and wonderful. Grandma also volunteered to straighten the record with the wider family. She organized a family gathering, excluding my parents, where she laid out the entire history of my parents' partiality, including events I had long forgotten or never even heard about. Having someone finally recognize the unfairness I had endured for years was vindicating, but it also reopened old wounds. Regarding my sister Nancy, she finally found her voice in all this. She came to me personally and apologized for not standing up for me earlier. After some soul-searching and several long talks with our grandmother, She admitted that while she also felt our parents' favoritism was improper, she had been too scared to confront it. We discussed our childhood and how it had shaped both of us in great depth and with emotional intensity. Nancy confessed that being the favored child wasn't as wonderful as it seemed. She never learned how to stand on her own 2 feet and felt immense pressure to live up to our parents' expectations. She told stories of times she yearned to accomplish things independently, but our parents would swoop in and handle everything for her, depriving her of the opportunity to develop and learn from her mistakes. For our relationship, this talk marked a sea change. We began to mend the sibling bond that our parents' partiality had broken. Just the 2 of us have been routinely meeting for coffee to discuss and support each other through this family crisis. Nancy's declaration that she was going to pay for college with her inheritance astonished everyone. She said that seeing me stand up for myself inspired her to start managing her own life. Once she decided what she wanted to study, she enrolled in a nearby community college, intending to transfer to a 4-year university. Our parents were taken aback. I think they knew deep down that their babying had not done Nancy any favors. Their response to all of this has been varied and changing. Initially, they attacked both of us angrily, trying to guilt Nancy into quitting college to help the family, claiming that I had turned her against them. When that failed, they changed tactics. After several protracted talks with my grandmother and witnessing Nancy's remarkable transformation, my mother began to acknowledge how damaging their actions had been. She has made some tentative moves toward reconciliation, even beginning therapy to address her issues. She reached out to apologize, admitting that she had been unfair and requesting a chance to make things right. It's a slow process, and while I'm cautiously hopeful, I'm also maintaining firm boundaries. Sadly, my dad has been less willing to accept any responsibility. Still furious, he sees himself as the victim in all this. He has been cold toward Nancy since she chose to go to college and hardly speaks to me. He has tried a few times to manipulate us, threatening to sell our childhood home if we don't come to our senses, or forgiving us if we realize we were wrong. Although we are both standing strong, it hurts to see him distance himself from both of his children like this. The dynamics among the extended family have changed dramatically. I now live closer to my dad's siblings. The support I have received from my grandmother, aunts, and uncles has been quite helpful. Having heard from them about handling my dad's challenging conduct over the years, I feel less isolated in this fight. This situation has also deepened my bonds with some of my cousins, who stood by me. As a result, we started a monthly cousin meal, allowing us all to catch up, free from the drama of the older generations. For myself, I have been making sensible use of my inheritance. Having paid off my college loans, I now feel an incredible sense of financial freedom. By working with a financial advisor, I have assembled a varied investment portfolio. I've also set aside some funds with the potential to launch my own company a few years down the line. One idea I'm exploring is opening a community center that offers reasonably priced mental health treatments and financial literacy seminars. However, the most significant use of the money has been buying therapy sessions for myself and volunteering to do the same for Nancy. Both of us are learning to set reasonable boundaries with our parents and are working on healing from our childhood experiences. Though it's a long road, I feel like I'm growing in knowledge and ability to overcome emotional neglect and long-term favoritism. This whole process has brought some surprising positive changes into my life. I now have a much clearer understanding of how to establish limits and defend myself. While I know I did the right thing, it hasn't been easy, and there are still difficult days. Despite this, I feel proud of myself for resisting guilt and pressure. One of the most unexpected results has been a shift in my career path. Dealing with family conflict and undergoing therapy has helped me see my own passion for supporting people who are dealing with similar family dysfunction. I'm currently considering returning to school to specialize in helping adult children of emotionally immature parents and eventually work as a family therapist. I've also been volunteering at a nearby youth facility, assisting young people from challenging family backgrounds. Being able to offer the kind of support and encouragement I wish I had received as a child has been immensely satisfying. I'm even considering using some of my inheritance to create a scholarship fund for children from similar circumstances. My contact with Nancy has been improving steadily. Once a month, we have a siblings' day where we do something enjoyable together, just the two of us. Our hiking and picnic last month were the most relaxed and connected I've felt with her since we were small children. Without our parents' influence, we are gently rebuilding our relationship on our own terms. Regarding my parents, things remain complicated. My mom has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship by regularly attending therapy sessions. She has even started to recognize some of the damage her favoritism caused. We've had a few one-on-one lunches where we've engaged in honest, albeit challenging, conversations about our past and future. While our relationship isn't perfect, there is visible improvement. My dad, however, remains resistant to change. He still maintains that he did nothing wrong and insists that Nancy and I should be more appreciative. He refuses to be in the same room as me, which has caused him to miss several family functions. Though it hurts, I am working on letting go of the need to make him see things differently or control his reactions. For both Nancy and me, our grandmother now serves as a steady source of support. She has been sharing more stories about our grandfather and his pride in us for standing up for ourselves. Always an advocate for justice and understanding, she has become a fantastic mediator in family conflicts. This entire journey has taught me a great deal about the true meaning of family. I've come to realize that sometimes the family you choose can be more supportive than the one you were born into. Alongside building a close-knit circle of friends who have been incredibly helpful, I've grown closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me. Setting boundaries and practicing self-care have become more essential to me than ever before. I'm getting better at saying no to situations that compromise my mental health, and I no longer feel guilty about prioritizing my personal well-being. For a long time, I was so focused on gaining my parents' approval that I neglected to explore new interests and hobbies. To anyone in a similar situation, I would advise, don't let anyone make you feel guilty about claiming what is rightfully yours, even if it causes controversy. It's okay to stand up for yourself, even though family dynamics can be complex. You deserve fair treatment. Remember, it's never too late to start building the life you deserve. Seek therapy if necessary. Surround yourself with supportive people, and don't be afraid to set boundaries. Your worth is defined by who you are, not by how your family treats you. I want to thank each of you again for your suggestions and encouragement. They meant more than you might realize during a very trying time. Although the road has not been easy, I am looking forward to the future and feeling a confidence I haven't experienced in years. I am excited about where this new chapter in my life will lead, and am determined to break the cycle of favoritism, creating healthier relationships in my own future family. Regarding my parents, things remain tricky. My mom has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship. She has been routinely attending therapy and has even begun to recognize some of the damage her favoritism caused. We've had a few one-on-one lunches where we've engaged in honest, though challenging, conversations about our past and the way forward. Although it's not perfect, I can see signs of improvement. My dad, on the other hand, still resists change. He insists that he has done nothing wrong and believes that Nancy and I should be more appreciative. He refuses to be in the same room with me, which has caused him to miss several family functions. Though it hurts, I am working hard to let go of the need to compel him to see things differently or to control his reactions. For both Nancy and me, Grandma now serves as a source of stability. She has been sharing more stories about our grandfather and his pride in us for standing up for ourselves. She has always been a strong advocate for justice and understanding, making her a fantastic mediator in family conflicts. This entire process has imparted many lessons about the true meaning of family. I've come to realize that sometimes the family you choose can be more supportive than the one you were born into. Alongside developing a close-knit circle of friends who have been incredibly helpful, I've grown closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me. Setting limits and practicing self-care have also become more crucial to me. I'm getting better at saying no to situations that compromise my mental health, and I no longer feel guilty about prioritizing my personal well-being. For so long, I was preoccupied with trying to gain my parents' approval, which made me neglect exploring new interests and hobbies. To those in similar circumstances, I would say, don't let anyone make you feel guilty about claiming what is rightfully yours, even if it causes controversy. It's okay to stand up for yourself, even though family dynamics can be complex. You deserve fair treatment. Remember, it's never too late to start building the life you deserve. Seek therapy if necessary. Surround yourself with supportive people, and don't hesitate to set boundaries. Your worth is defined by who you are, not by how your family treats you. I want to thank each of you once more for your suggestions and encouragement. They meant more than you could have known during such a challenging period. Although the road has not been easy, I am optimistic about the future and feel a sense of self-assurance that I haven't experienced in years. The possibilities that this new chapter of my life presents are exciting, and I am determined to break the pattern of favoritism and build healthier relationships in my own future family. Thank you for reading. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories happening around you.